All right, let's talk about something we've all experienced and maybe even dreaded, the online group project. Today, we're going to dig into some really eye-opening research that cracks the code on what makes these projects either an amazing collaboration or, a total disaster.
You know that feeling, right? Your professor announces a group project, and boom, you're suddenly in a chat group with a bunch of names you don't recognize, and your mind just starts racing. Are these people going to be reliable? Is anyone actually going to do any work? It's that mix of, okay, maybe this will be cool, and a whole lot of, oh no, what have I gotten myself into?
Well, it turns out the answer to whether your team is going to thrive or completely dive pretty much boils down to one single powerful thing: trust. It's like the secret ingredient, the glue that holds everything together. But online, you can't just assume it's there. You actually have to build it. So how does that even work when you're not in the same room? Let's get into it.
So, what's the big deal? Why is building trust so much harder when you're just a bunch of faces on a screen? Well, the problem comes down to something we totally take for granted in our real-world interactions.
And that missing piece is something called sociability. Just think about it. All those little moments, bumping into someone after class, chatting about your weekend, grabbing a coffee. That's where real, solid trust gets built. But online, we tend to skip all that. We jump right into the work, and that's exactly where the cracks start to form. And this isn't some new 21st century problem. Way back in 1995, a researcher named Charles Handy absolutely nailed it when he said trust needs touch. His whole point was that we humans rely on being physically present with each other to figure out if we can count on someone. And that really gets to the core of the challenge today. How do you create that connection without the handshake, without the shared space? So the research we're diving into found that teams in this online world tend to split into two very, very different paths. It's really a tale of two completely different group project experiences. On one side, you have your trusting teams. These are the groups you dream of being in, right? They actually build friendships. They talk to each other. When something goes wrong, they figure it out. And most importantly, everybody carries their own weight. But then you have the trust-compromised teams. And yeah, we've all been on one of these. The relationships are just about the task. Communication is awful. And the second there's a problem, the whole thing just falls apart. And one or two poor souls are left to do all the work. And you can really hear the difference in how students talk about it. Take this quote from Lily. She said, "Those informal chats are what created a real bond. And that bond made it okay to ask for help, to be a little vulnerable. And that's where real learning happens." The trust-compromised teams, though, they do the exact opposite. Every interaction is strictly business. Did you do your section? Here's my part. It's all just transactions. They never build that personal safety net, which means when things get tough, there's absolutely nothing to catch them when they fall. And let's be honest, things always get tough. No team is perfect. So the real test isn't if your team will face a problem, it's how your team responds when it happens. So what happens when that trust is put to the test? Okay, get ready for this number because it's a big one. 100%. You heard that right. Every single learner in this study had a moment where trust was broken. Someone just disappeared or missed a deadline or didn't pull their weight. So conflict, it's not a possibility. It's a guarantee. And man, you can just feel the raw frustration in this quote from a student named Faith. A teammate just vanished. And look at her words. They had to pick up the slack, and the workload grew exponentially. That final ugh just says it all, doesn't it? There's actually a technical term for this kind of behavior. It's called social loafing. It's basically when someone in a group decides to mentally check out and just lets everyone else do the heavy lifting. It's probably one of the fastest ways to destroy a team's trust. So what happens to one of those trust-compromised teams when a social loafer shows up? Well, it's a total train wreck. Since there's no personal connection to fall back on, communication just stops. People get angry, the resentment builds, and teamwork grinds to a halt. That one little problem, it becomes the thing that sinks the entire ship. That the trusting teams, a completely different story. They're resilient. They can handle it. They actually talk about the problem instead of ignoring it. They shuffle work around to help each other out. They even use simple tricks like color coding a Google Doc to keep everyone accountable. It's that friendship, that personal bond that acts like a shock absorber when things get bumpy. And that brings us to the absolute heart of all this, the big takeaway from the research. The secret to a killer online team isn't about being the smartest person in the room or having the perfect project plan. It's about friendship.
See, when you're working with friends, you feel secure, you feel validated, and from a psychological standpoint, that's huge. It lets your brain switch off its threat detection mode and turn on its open and creative mode. The researchers call this a cooperative socialization context, which is a fancy way of saying it's a safe space where people actually feel comfortable enough to work together, to ask dumb questions, and to learn from each other.
And listen to how a student named Neely puts it. She says learning from a peer, someone on your level, just makes you feel more confident. And what's really cool is that when you explain something to a friend, it actually helps both of you understand it better. It's a total win-win. Okay, so that's the why. Now for the really important part, the how. What can you actually do in your next online project to make sure you're building one of these trusting teams? Well, the research gives us some really clear, practical steps. First, always start with a 5-minute social. Seriously. Just take 5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to chat about anything but the project. It's not wasted time. It's an investment. Second, set really clear expectations right from the start. Who's doing what? When is it due? How are we going to talk to each other? Get it all out of the open. Third, and this one is huge, be a human. Remember your teammates have other classes, jobs, lives. Be willing to help someone out if they're having a rough week. And finally, make the work visible. Use shared docs, task lists, whatever. It's not about micromanaging, it's about creating shared responsibilities so everyone knows what's going on. So in the end, it all comes down to this simple question. The research is crystal clear. The teams that only focus on the task, they're fragile. They break easily. But the teams that take a little extra time to build those personal connections, to actually build a team, they're the ones who not only get a better grade, but actually have a better experience doing it. So the choice is yours. Are you just trying to finish a task, or are you trying to build a team?